Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 22 of the Journey Running Podcast, where the goal is to help you run farther, feel smarter, and develop character through trail and ultra running. I am your host, registered dietitian, coach, and ultra runner Stefan Schuster, and welcome again to the show. Really excited for this episode. Today, we're going to be having on my dad, Craig Schuster. He has run 3 marathons and a trail 50K, which he just ran last year at the age of 62 years old. So I think that the insights that he has into training and racing ultra marathons later in life, which is when he got into running really, is going to be a lot different and unique compared to some of the other guests who I've had on so far. Before we get into the episode, though, I do want to remind people that Journey Running is also my business. Like I said, I'm a coach and a dietitian, so if you or anyone you know is looking for either running coaching services or nutrition coaching services, you can reach out to me directly at my website, journeyruncoaching.com. You can also email me directly at journeyrunningllc@gmail.com. Additionally, I did, like I said in my last episode, which was my race report on running the Western States 100, I said that I was going to be putting out a blog. I have done so. There is now a blog just on the navigation bar of my website. Once again, that's journeyruncoaching.com. The first 2 posts are a race report on my Western States 100 and recap of my experience crewing and pacing the Badwater 135. If you're interested in reading that, you can check out the website, or you can also find those blogs, which are going to be posted going forward on Substack. My @ on Substack is just @JourneyRunning. So you can feel free to consume the audio version or the written version now of those race recaps at your convenience. So enjoy that. Without further ado, though, let's get right into today's episode. It is one that I've been planning for a while and that I'm super excited for. I think it came out great, and I know that there's a lot of great tidbits in there for you guys who are training for your next race out there. So without further ado, let's introduce and welcome to the show, Craig Schuster. All right, and I am here with Craig Schuster, my dad. Welcome finally to the Journey Running Podcast. This episode is long overdue. I'm super stoked to have you on, and I can finally have you on now that last year at 62 years old, you ran your first ultra, a 50K in Ithaca, New York, the Cayuga 50K. So congratulations. Now you qualify to be a guest on the Journey Running Podcast, but I'm really excited for this one. I have probably the most questions for this episode that I've ever gone into a podcast recording with. So yeah, before I get into my questions, I'm going to hand off the conversation to you. I'll let you introduce yourself. Who are you? You can tell people a little bit about your background, maybe what you do for a living, stuff like that. And then, we'll go from there.
Okay, my name is Craig Schuster. I am Stefan's dad. We live in northern New Jersey, in Oradell, New Jersey, which is where Stefan grew up. And for a living, I am a program management, IT program management professional, typically working in financial services. And, in my spare time, I do like to work out 5 days a week. I'm either running or working out with kettlebells and just try to stay with that and stay in shape. And actually, I was a week short of 63 when I ran that race.
Yeah. How did you get into running? Because when you were younger, you come from more of a basketball player background. At least that's what you've told me. I remember when I was in middle school, you told me that you had to try out for your basketball team and you had to work hard and train to make it. And you told me I was going to have to make my cross country team going into middle school. And then it turned out everybody made the team. So all that hard work I put in that summer training at Cape Cod on our family vacations was not for nothing, but I was the only one who showed up prepared to run that season because of you. But how did you go from being like a basketball player in your early days to, it sounds like from what you've told me, you did a lot of strength training and weightlifting when you were in your 20s to, you had a family starting in your 30s. What has that athletic progression been like for you?
Well, I always did a little bit of running, but I never took it seriously as being, a runner. I did play a lot of basketball. And when I got out of college and I was in my 20s, I lived in New York City. I remember going to one of the high schools near where we lived, and we were playing basketball, on the courts there. And some of the kids there were just so incredibly athletic. Some of them could stuff, it was really hard. So I decided I needed to join the gym, and just get in better shape if I wanted to play basketball. But I got very into working out, and I did a lot of work with weights. I did aerobic work as well, but I was doing a lot of lifting at that time. And so, you know, at that time, I would say I was in the best shape of my life because I was doing both. And, then I reached the point where I got married, started a family, all of those things. And, some of those things fall by the wayside a little bit. Again, I still did a little bit of running, but nothing that I would call like I do now. I mean, if I went out and ran 2 or 3 miles, I thought it was a long run. Um, you know, and, you know, I really got into running in my mid 50s after major knee surgery, just from being inspired watching you, quite frankly. I watched you run the Pittsburgh Marathon, even with an injury. I watched you run the Chicago Marathon where you were flying around that place until you actually had an injury during the race. It was what was really inspiring to me was during the Chicago Marathon, before we saw you, or maybe it was after, there were two men that ran right past me that I realized one was actually tethered to the other. And it was because one man was blind and he was running the race with a guide. And I
Mhm.
just thought, wow, that was really inspiring to me to think, well, if I train, I could do this, right? Like if he could do that, because that takes a lot of guts, then I need to try this. And then and also when you ran Pittsburgh, there was a woman who crossed the finish line where two men ran out from the side in the last couple of 100 yards and they held up a banner on either side of her. So over her head, it said "Earth Marathon." And I mean, if that
Oh,
doesn't
wow.
inspire you, nothing will. So that's when I said to you, after my knee surgery, I'm going to get in shape. I'm going to run a marathon with you. And you and I ran the Marine Corps Marathon.
Yeah, yeah, I'm super excited to get into all that. It's crazy. I didn't know those stories actually about like that those were two events that inspired you at those events. I thought it was just like, oh, you went to Pittsburgh, you went to Chicago. I did run Pittsburgh with an injury because I was young and I I was annoyed that I put in so much training and I still wanted to try and finish. I just thought that you like went to it and you saw how many people, just the amount of finishers that there were. I thought made you think to yourself that you could do it.
Well, the energy was cool. That definitely.
And it's kind of crazy in ultra running. There's actually people who are blind who do run ultras too, and they have guides. I don't know how they do it. At least on a marathon course on concrete, there's nothing really that you can trip over. I am amazed by the people who are blind and yeah have that disability and finish on the trails. One thing that a lot of people, and we're going to get into for sure the Marine Corps Marathon, we're going to get into your New York Marathon, Chicago, we're going to get into the 50K you ran. But one thing I think is cool is that also before you got into running your own races, a fun fact that many people really don't know about you is that you're actually also a retired race director. You did this before, yeah, running all those marathons. So when I was in like middle school, high school, you created, if I remember correctly, the Oradell 5K on behalf of the OK Kids Foundation. And yeah, what inspired you to start a 5K for them back then? And what was it like being a race director?
Well, I was the president of the Oradell Kids Foundation, which had a race and then discontinued it for a while. And a number of our other fundraisers sort of went by the wayside. And so we needed a way to make money, but the race didn't have enough of a drawing to really either attract sponsors or make enough money just from entry fees.
Hmm.
So the very first year, we really struggled, to provide the donations that we normally would.
Hmm.
But we sort of limped through that year and put a plan together and we started developing. We got more people interested in running, not just from our town, but from other towns by having the race course sanctioned so that, it became a race that, counted for people toward points, for races that they ran. So that was important. And then we did get some local businesses to sponsor us, within the town or one or two surrounding towns. And
Hmm.
that was important just to keep us going enough. That race started, I would say the first year we had maybe 75 people run it. And I will
Hmm.
tell you that today they have upwards of 300 people run that race.
Yeah.
And that also mean and they also have the fun run, which follows the 5K, and where you that used to maybe get 75 to 100 people, it also gets a good few hundred people. So the entry fees, there are more sponsors simply because there's more people that the sponsors want, they want that, they want that, you know, the ability to reach people And so they're reaching more people this way. And we do get a lot more people from other towns because it's become a good race to run.
Yeah, I was looking it up before this because I was interested to see if it was still going when I was coming up with questions for you. And I saw they had like 500 or 600 finishers last year, and they have the list of sponsors is really long. I mean, I saw like Hackensack Chick-fil-A sponsors it or something. I
Yeah,
thought
I
that
mean,
was
we never
funny.
used to
Yeah.
get things like that, and I would get rejection letters from companies saying, "You're just not big enough. You don't have
Mhm.
enough people." And now they do, which I'm not part of it now today, but, I'm really proud of the fact that we were able to do that and provide that for the town.
Yeah, you started it. I was like, they should have your name on the website somewhere. I think it's their biggest fundraiser now.
Like I said, we more or less picked it back up. I can't take credit for starting it.
Mhm.
I had a great team also, so it helps.
What did that raise money for again? It was like parks and library stuff for the kids in town.
It was for to provide programs and resources for kids of all ages within the town. So that meant we provided things like school trips that could be paid for like kids in elementary school.
Hmm.
We might have provided things like new speakers in the auditorium for when they would perform concerts or plays or things like that.
Hmm.
We also bought new equipment for, some of the sports teams in the high school, and things like that. So, there were it sort of ran the gamut. There were a couple of scholarships every year in the high school when kids graduated.
Hmm.
That was part of the graduation process that, we picked a few winners each year, and one girl, one boy. And we had, when you graduated from the elementary school, there was an essay contest that somebody won, say a gift card for that as well. So there were a lot of different ways where we gave back to the kids in town. And because it's a 501(c)(3), that meant that any money you raised that year had to be spent that year. So
Hmm.
as our budget grew, we were able to do more and more.
Yeah, that's really cool. I missed an opportunity to wear my 5K shirt, my race shirt from back when I was in high school for this podcast.
Yeah, you
I
won that
still
race.
Yeah, I did win it. I think it's too big and I'm too slow now to win it, but when I was 16 training for Ks in high school, I was able to win it when there was not many other people signed up.
I don't think the winner this year ran your time. I know people have
I have
beat
no
it,
idea.
but I don't think the winner this year ran your time actually.
Yeah. Well, it was fun being fast back then, but I can't run a 17-minute 5K anymore. Maybe we'll have to try. This is actually a good transition into and I didn't plan it this way, but it's actually a really good transition into your Marine Corps marathon because I guess you're a very charitable man. You also signed up for Marine Corps via a charity entry because in 2017 that was my senior year in college, and we both applied to the lottery for the Marine Corps Marathon. And I got in, but you didn't. And you said, well, I still want to do that one, so I'm going to do it anyway. So you ran on behalf of, was it just called the Diabetes Foundation?
It was diabetes research.
Diabetes Research. Yeah.
I don't
And
remember the exact name of the organization, but it was for diabetes research. And I
okay.
did that in honor of my dad because
Mhm.
he had diabetes.
Yeah, type 1 runs in our family, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. And during your training cycle, you were actually diagnosed with, I presume it was type 2 diabetes because you said that you got your A1C corrected.
Well, I had what you'd call borderline, high blood sugar,
Mhm.
and they put me on medication for that, but I wasn't really labeled a diabetic at that time.
It was probably pre-diabetes. Now I know more about this stuff now that I've gone through my education to be a dietitian, but back then I didn't I don't think I fully understood it in, 8 years ago now. But I think it's an important topic to bring up for a few reasons because one of those is that a lot of people who run think that running is synonymous with being healthy, but being healthy is a lot more than just having strong cardiovascular strength. It also means, lifting weights at the gym and preserving your muscle mass through strength work. It does mean, having a strong cardiovascular system, but it also means eating healthy, living a lower stress life, sleeping well, stuff like that. So I think it's a really important topic to bring up. But yeah, what was your training like for your first marathon, the Marine Corps Marathon, all the way back in 2017? I assume it's a little bit different than what you're doing now, but that was your first marathon. You were 56 years old, and Yeah, 56, right? When you were training for that, what was it like training at 56 years old for your first marathon, and after you also had some knee issues back then too?
Yeah, I had had knee surgery for patella tendon, so that was kind of significant and went through 6 months of rehab and physical therapy. Just to add what you were saying about nutrition there, I did
Hmm.
talk to the doctor at that time about drinking a lot of Gatorade running in the summer, preparing for that race because so much sugar in it. And
Hmm.
his answer to me was at my level of borderline diabetes, he just felt that you need the sugar in order to, if you're going to be running 15, 18, 20 miles on a given Saturday, you need to replenish. So it
Hmm.
wasn't going to be too much of a problem. He didn't say to drink it 7 days a week, but my training was different then for 2 reasons. One, mentally, I still didn't know if I could do it,
Hmm.
So I remember the first time I went out and ran, I think it was 6 miles. I came home and I was literally exhausted. And I remember saying, I don't know, how am I going to run 26, much less like I have to run 10 in a couple of weeks. Like, what am I supposed to do? Right. But you keep going and you just keep building. And what I remember was I reached a point during the summer where I came home from work one day and I said, I'm not going to eat dinner. I'm going to go running first and I'll eat dinner later. I said, but it won't take too long. I said, I only have 9 miles to do. And I walked out the door and I remember thinking, did I just say only 9 miles after, the way I felt about 6 miles not that long ago?
Hmm.
So it was pretty cool, like to have that feeling and see it growing and see it growing. And when I finally hit 20 miles, which unfortunately was on a day where it was like 95 degrees in August, I was, that was hard. Okay. That was really hard. There was some walking involved there too, just because it was so hot.
Yeah.
And actually, I felt like I was dehydrating a little too fast at one point. So, you stick with it, you keep drinking. I always made sure I had stuff with me, but training for the 50K was much more about food and nutrition while I ran than I did than what I really thought about during the training for the marathons.
Hmm.
Because no matter how far I ran during the marathons, the number of hours wasn't as many as running trails.
Right. And you also have to prepare for time on feet when you're training for something like an ultra. Um, because I mean, I think that 50K, yeah, that took you like double the amount of time that the some of the marathons took.
Yeah, I was, looking back, I still feel like I was slower than I should have been,
Mhm.
but, my goal was simply to finish, so I'm not
Yeah.
complaining.
Well,
I
you're.
would say, so training for Marine Corps was great, except I injured my quad at one point and had trouble running because I couldn't put weight on it, like I couldn't pound on it. So
Mhm.
I actually rode a bike. So, but the way I rode a bike was, it wasn't like well, if I was supposed to run 10 miles, I would bike 10 miles because that would not be equivalent. So
Mhm.
if 10 miles were to take me, let's say an hour and a half, then I knew I had to bike and pedal for an hour and a half.
Yeah.
And the way I thought about it, and when I would go out and use the bike until I could get back to running so that
Yeah.
I could keep my stamina up and keep building. And it worked. It actually worked.
And I know you didn't really do marathons when you were like earlier in life, like in your 20s and 30s, but I know you have talked to me about how training for races later in life in your 50s and your 60s, you presume it's a lot different than, what somebody else is doing at a younger age. You've told me that you run less days per week, but you are more efficient with the days that you are taking advantage of. What's your biggest piece of advice for somebody who's in their maybe 40s, 50s, 60s, training for their first endurance race later on in their life?
So it's exactly that. When I started my training for the Cayuga Trails race, I was running 4 days a week,
Mhm.
and I immediately, not immediately, but I was starting to wear down. My knees were hurting, a lot, and I kept thinking. I remember there was one day where I was supposed to do 19 miles on my long day,
Mhm.
and there was no way I was going to be able to run it. I was in pain before I even started.
Mhm.
So I went out that day and went to the same trails that I always worked out on, and I walked 19 miles at a fast pace. The idea was to keep building time on my feet and just do it, right? No
Mhm.
matter how long it took, and it did take a long time. But it also gave me a lot of confidence because when I calculated it out, I still would have finished the Cayuga race. Obviously, the Cayuga race was tougher, more hills, more incline, etc. But just in terms of distance, I would have finished,
Mhm,
at the pace that I walked. 'Cause I was walking at a pretty good pace, but still it was walking. But it got
mhm,
me through that week until my knees sort of settled down, and I switched to 3 days a week.
mhm,
And by the way, 2 of those days were Saturday and Sunday, because I liked the idea, and I did this during marathon training, of if you ran on Sunday after running Saturday with no recovery day,
mhm.
it helped you build a lot of stamina, and then Monday was always a rest day.
Yeah. And you've always done a lot of like P90X and strength videos and cross training too.
P90X, then I did Insanity. So I always had pretty good cardio. So when I went to 3 days, when I was at 4 days, I actually was doing kettlebells just 1 day a week. So I made it 2 days a week so that I was, and when I took away that running day, I was still exercising. And I
Mhm,
will tell you that I don't think there's any way I would have finished the Cayuga race if I was not doing the cross training and the strength training on those alternate days.
mhm.
So I was Tuesday, Thursday on kettlebells. Wednesday, I would run, and I would usually use Wednesday as a, uh, I don't want to call it a speed day because I wasn't doing too much speed, but a little
Mhm.
faster than on the weekends. And then on Saturday was my long day, and Sunday was, just, stay at a steady pace or a race pace type of a day, no matter what the distance was.
Would you say that have enjoyed your training over the years?
Uh, I would say I enjoyed it. I did endure some painful moments. One of the things that happened early in my trail race training was, of course, I was running a little too fast on a downhill and fell. Uh,
Oh, no.
I didn't just fall, but slid. And when you slide, you take all the skin off your legs. So that wasn't fun. And by the way, for anybody listening to this, when I told Stefan that I did that, all he said to me was, "Welcome to trail racing."
I was waiting for that. Yeah, I mean, you were also training at you used to train where my high school races were at Garrett Mountain in Patterson. Sometimes I forget the names of the towns back in New Jersey. Compared to Colorado, it's kind of crazy because I mean, you've been out here. Every mile is a new town in New Jersey compared to Colorado where like, Denver extends for like miles and like Boulder is it's a big town. Broomfield is a big town. Arvada is a big town. These are not like 1 by 1 mile places.
I
So a
will
little bit
say that,
different.
running around here, I actually fell at Ramapo Reservation, but
Mm,
I stopped running at Ramapo, not because I fell there, but because it's really hard to run there. There's a lot of big loose rock, and that's not what I think I tripped over a tree root actually,
mhm,
but it makes it hard to do any running. So I went to Garrett because there's more places where there's some hills, not gigantic hills, but enough that I could run them
mhm,
because they're single track sort of dirt trails for the most part with a few rocks.
mhm,
There's a couple of spots that are rocky where you slow down a bit, but as I got better at it and doing them week after week, I could run those at
mhm.
that time. I don't think I could go there today after not doing it for a while and run them, but I did then. But, um, you know, you there's a lot of trails that you don't realize are at Garrett, and I got to find all of them out. And I took you there last year, so you got to see some of them.
Yeah.
And it was a good place to run. The trails were quiet. People stayed along the road for the most part. So,
Mhm,
and the fact that there was a road with a big hill that ran around the place, there were times where I ran on the road just because I wanted to be running at a little bit better pace,
yeah,
and get some hill work in. So I had the option to do both and go from the road to the hills and to the trails and back again and things like
yeah,
that. Also, because it was a big circle, it meant that at any point in time I could pass my car and stop and get some food, if I'm gonna be out there running for 4, 5, 6 hours, you know,
yeah,
or replenish because I was wearing a running belt, and I would have to replenish my bottles,
mhm,
so what about food, but, my fluids as well.
yeah. Yeah, we did go for a run at, Garrett where you were showing me where you were doing all of your training last year. That was fun. I think that was, like, one of the only times we've run together because in, the other points in my life when I was in, like, high school, I was always going a little too fast.
It
We
wasn't
ran to
that
Cape Cod
that I was
when
going too slow and you didn't want to hang back.
one of my regrets is I was not in the shape for the Marine Corps Marathon in 2017 when we were both running it. Is I was not in the shape to run a BQ. My grandmother, Memi, had passed away that summer. I had just moved to Colorado. I started a new job. I was getting acclimated to Denver, where after going to Ohio State, I had no friends here. So life was just hectic, and I was not in shape to run a BQ. For whatever reason, I still tried. I kind of wish that I just ran that marathon side by side with you in retrospect now, but it is what it is. It was a cool marathon that goes around DC, and you see a lot of the sights. I didn't even see them. I was so tired during the race that they were all just a sweaty blur. I
Well,
remember.
one of the things I was always impressed about you was when you're on the trail or you're running a race, like, you remember every inch of it, and I say that because there was a point after you finished the Marine Corps Marathon, you called me on my phone,
Mhm.
and, I had my phone on my arm because I was listening to music, so it was easy for me to just, use Siri to answer the phone or whatever,
Yeah.
and I said to you, I was just coming up on the 21-mile mark, and I mentioned that my knee was starting to hurt and things like that, and you immediately said to me, "So you're on the uphill part of it right now. You're gonna be coming down off of the highway that you're on, so the down ramp, it's gonna get easier." Like, you remembered every detail of the spot of where I was, and I was like, "He's never run this course before. How did he know that?" You know?
All right.
And
You really.
you told me details like that on trails that you've been on, in Denver in Colorado that I'm always impressed by that.
I don't know. For whatever reason, I can remember trails very well. You should see. If I don't know if you saw it, but my Western States race report was 22 Word doc pages, single spaced, because I wanted all of the details in there. I still have to write my Leadville one, but it's probably going to be pretty long too. And also, I mean, I've never mentioned this publicly, but I've been writing a book, and there's a lot of shorter race reports that are in like a book format too that are going to be in there that are very detailed. But yeah, what was your experience at your first marathon like out there? It was a hot day. I mean, that race is a little odd for a few reasons because, like, first of all, we had this really long walk in the morning to like
Oh,
past the
yeah.
Pentagon to the start line. I mean, that was at least a mile. And then like we were waiting around for like an hour just on a grassy field or something, and then
Well,
we
we were
went to our
sitting in the middle of
corals.
the parking lot.
Oh, yeah, it was like a park. Yeah, it was a parking lot. And then, but the start is really cool with like the military planes that fly over you, and they have people parachuting out with American flags. And then we got kind of a hot day. It was just a very unique experience. I feel like for a lot of reasons. But what was your experience out there like?
So I was having so much fun, at the start of the race, but I kept thinking, just keep going kind of thing, right? And I remember, when I said to you that my knee started to hurt at 21 miles, I could actually feel something a little tight even around 8 miles. And I remember taking a few uh, Advil or a leave or something at the 8-mile mark where I saw, the whole family that was there to see us run. And but what I remembered was from about mile 6 to about 12 was the one time in my life where I have really felt like I had the runner's high. I was, like, floating for those 6 miles, like, I didn't even feel them. I was just coasting along, and it felt great, like, just in my head. I was just enjoying every minute of it. And if you remember that peninsula that we were out on at one point during, I'd say around mile 8, 10, something like that, there was it was a beautiful scenery and all that, but aside from that, I'm running along the side of the road and everyone's high-fiving you and all that. It was just a lot of fun, everybody's holding the American flags during that race.
Hmm.
Um, and when I got a little further into the race, I remember around mile 17, I could feel it tightening up a little bit more, but I
Hmm.
kept going, kept pushing. Maybe I should have taken a walk break there. I really don't know. When
Hmm.
I came down that ramp that you were talking about after 21 miles, then I started to really feel it and it was tightening up, and I kept trying to weigh, because I was running at a pace where I could have probably hit my time goal, but I kept thinking, do I want to damage my knee in the process or do I want to, because I didn't know if I might do any damage.
Hmm.
Um, and it was not the knee that I had the surgery on. So I have to, yeah, that became my good knee. So, I just kept going. I ran a little, I walked a little, I ran a little, I walked a little. I did what I could do. And I remember this is a funny moment that I'll never forget. When I got to the 26-mile mark, you remember this, you turn a
Oh, of
corner.
course.
As soon as you pass the 26 mile, you turn a corner and you go up the last 2/10 straight up a hill.
Hmm.
And I knew that somewhere along there, I'd see the family watching. So I was like, there's no way I'm walking up that hill. I am running, even if it's slowly, I'm running up that hill. But one of the funniest things that happened was as I'm approaching that 26-mile sign and the arrow that points up the hill, there's two women behind me that are talking and they're very loud. And one of them said to the other, we should run to the finish line. Like we should run to we shouldn't walk to the finish line. Let's do it. And the other one goes, yeah, let's do it. And then you see them look like I could see what's happening. I'm not watching them. I'm in front of them. But one of them suddenly goes, are you fucking kidding me? Just like that. And all I could do was laugh as I was going up there.
That little finish is like really a kick in the nuts at the end of that race. It's the steepest part of the course, and it's the last quarter mile.
By far the steepest part. But the coolest thing about that race, or any race, at least of the races I've been to or done,
Hmm.
was when you get finished, you walk down like one of those roped lanes,
Hmm.
and at the end of it, there's a Marine standing there who puts the medal around your neck
Hmm.
and gives you a salute. And I just thought that was like the coolest thing of the whole day.
I don't even remember it. I was so tired that I was wondering where the Iwo Jima statue was after the race. It was behind the Marine that was giving you your medal. I was so tired I didn't even look up and see it.
And then the other thing I remember was after the race, they had those food trucks lined up, and you and I were like pounding on the bacon at the food truck.
I remember we all went out for lunch after that.
Yeah, we did. We did.
Good times.
It was a fun day. It was a good day.
How
And
does
as far as raising money, I actually was tied with another woman for like the highest, you know, amount of donations for that particular charity. So I was proud of that too.
Oh wow, that's impressive. Do you know what the number was?
Our first, I will tell you, our goal was $500,
Mhm.
and we both hit somewhere in the 2,700, between 2,700 and 2,800.
Oh nice.
Yeah.
That's good. That far surpasses, yeah, the goal. I think I ran Pittsburgh on behalf of a charity just because I think I saw an article by Dean Karnassus that talked about running for a purpose greater than yourself, and I thought that would be cool. And then I said, "How am I going to raise $500?" And then I sent the link to you, and you had your friends fundraise for me.
I was actually surprised by how many people donated, but there were people that I know from business that I wasn't necessarily best of friends with, but they had family members that had diabetes and they felt strongly about donating. So
Hmm.
you just don't know.
Yeah, and then after Marine Corps, you ended up doing two more marathon. Well, Marine Corps is not a marathon world major. I feel like it should have been in that mix, but anyways, you ended up running New York and Chicago. What was it like running the New York Marathon? Because you spent your entire life from childhood through now living in the tri-state area. What was it like running through the five boroughs? Do you feel like you saw your city in a different light? How was that marathon compared to the others? Because I think that was your second one, right?
That was the second. I finished Marine Corps. I had so much fun. I put my name in the lottery for New York and I couldn't believe that I got it. And immediately thought, okay, what do I do now? So I started the training all over again in the spring. I kept running during the winter because you find out in like early March,
Hmm.
but started training in earnest, in the late spring, early summer,
Hmm.
you know, and of course it's always harder running in the heat than, the day of the race was 40 degrees. So that was different. Um,
Hmm.
the New York City Marathon is a 26-mile party. When you run through Brooklyn, you're in Brooklyn for almost half of the race, for like 12 miles of the race. And at every corner, there's a band, there's somebody with a boombox, there's somebody playing music, and it's different music on every corner, so you hear dance music, you hear jazz, you hear all kinds of different things. And then again in the Bronx, when you come over the bridge back into, Harlem, there's bands playing and jazz bands. It's very cool.
Hmm.
There's just so many people out having a great time on that day. The only place you don't see people is obviously on the bridges.
Hmm.
There aren't spectators allowed out there. And the hardest part of that race is when you get to the Queensboro Bridge. You enter the bridge and you hit the 15-mile mark, and you go about a mile and a quarter straight uphill over this bridge. It is hard. Most people are walking it. You know, a lot of people take breaks and go off to the side and take pictures of the Manhattan skyline from there.
Hmm.
I kept going because I just wanted to, but it takes a lot out of you. You really have to train for that specifically.
Yeah.
And, but it's a great, great race. I would recommend it to anyone who wants to run a marathon. Although I will say Chicago and Marine Corps are easier, they're flatter.
Yeah, those races with bridges like Pittsburgh and New York are pretty tough. If you're trying to run like a Boston qualifying time or a PR, they're tough races to do that on because these bridges, they're U-shaped. You got to run up and then you get to run down them, but you got to run up first to get over them.
As you know, there's a woman who lives right down the block from us here who was a competitive runner. And by competitive, I mean she would run 2.5 hour New York marathon.
Hmm.
I remember talking to her before the marathon, and she said to me, New York is not the place to PR. You know, of all there are a lot of races you will PR in. New York is not one of them.
Yeah,
So, that told me all I needed to know going into that race.
yeah.
Hearing that from a really well accomplished runner.
Well, at least you got some that info ahead of time.
Yeah, yeah. So
Keeps
I
your
was prepared for that,
expectations in
but
check.
I did not know that the bridge was going to be what it was. She did
Hmm.
not tell me that specifically. But, if I run that race again, I'll be far more mentally prepared for that.
Yeah.
Uh, and I would like to put my name in the lottery again this coming year, so we'll see.
Yeah, that's exciting. Yeah, so it's wild that you got into New York on your first try, actually, because people who apply to the New York Marathon have like was it like a 3 or 5% chance of getting in? And you
This year
got
it was
into,
about 2.5, but when I did it, it was more like it was a bit better than it is now. It's gotten significantly harder.
okay, that's what I thought. I mean, I ran Chicago in 2015, and back then you had like a 60% chance of getting in. And these days, I believe it's like a 20 or 25% chance. It's much harder. And I think that they allocate spots there to a certain percentage to faster athletes now, too, so you can actually qualify to get into it, which was not a thing when I ran Chicago 10 years ago. But you got into New York on your first try. You also got into Chicago in what year did you get into Chicago? That was also your first try of applying.
21, I think it was. It was after COVID. And
Hmm.
that was the reason that I ran it. I was like, it was after COVID. I felt like I needed a goal. I needed to run a race. And I knew from when we watched you run Chicago that it was an easy race or a good race for mom to watch the race because there
Hmm.
were multiple spots where you could see a runner without having to go very far. If you remember, it sort of went out and back and then out and back this way. And so
Hmm.
if you stayed in the middle and just sort of walked, you could see your runner multiple times.
Hmm.
And so I chose Chicago. Plus, we loved Chicago when we were there, and we had a great weekend aside from the race itself.
Oh man, you're gonna hate me, but I actually, because of our trip to Chicago for my Chicago Marathon in 2015 was my first time there. And the first night we were there, and like the night after the marathon, we went to Lou Malnati's for pizza. And I'm a trader. I like Chicago. I like deep dish over New York style. It's just
Okay, well, I still like New York style better, but I enjoyed the pizza in Chicago.
I think there's more places in New York that are better. Like you can just get an amazing slice on every corner. Colorado kind of sucks when it comes to food. It's also funny, just on the topic of food, totally off topic from our podcast, but when I was driving Uber part time through grad school, I enjoyed asking people if they knew what a black and white cookie was, and out here that's not a thing. People like so many people just have no idea what a black and white cookie is, and if you're listening to this and you don't, look it up. Look up the Seinfeld clip. Look to the cookie. It's
You don't know what you're missing if you've never had one.
yeah, right. I guess there's not a lot of Jewish delis out here either, but
Yeah, well,
yeah. How did you like Chicago? I know every time you trained for a race, I'm sure being confined at home during COVID was not a ton of fun, just like it wasn't for a lot of people. I know mom always jokes that you don't do your chores when you're training for races, so this was probably a good opportunity to get out of the house and train again. So it sounds like you also enjoyed Chicago. How did that compare to your first two marathons?
I definitely had the confidence that as long as I followed the plan, didn't get injured, I was gonna be okay.
Hmm.
I still made the mistake of starting too fast in that race to finish the way I wanted to finish.
Hmm.
I have to say, it was 80 degrees that day. It was hot. I mean, I watched people all around me, like, cramping and literally falling to the ground. I mean, I cramped, but I didn't fall to the ground like a few of them did. It was actually, scary to watch people doing that, you know?
Oh no.
But, I did a good job of hydrating. I did a good job of eating. Maybe I should have eaten more bananas, a little more potassium,
Hmm.
but for the most part, I think I just went out too fast the first 5, 7 miles because I know that my halfway point time was really fast for a half marathon, like, for me, not for
Hmm.
anybody else. But for me, it was really fast, and I still remember my brother texting me and saying, "You're flying," and I thought, "Is that a good" like, I kept thinking, "Good," because I was feeling really good at that point. It wasn't until later where the heat really started getting me, you
Yeah.
know?
What sorry, there was a little bit of echo there, so I got a little distracted by a second. Do you remember what your times were in those first few marathons you ran?
They were all very consistent, actually.
Mhm.
Ran I never broke the 5 hours that I wanted to because at the end of each, I either cramped or my knee hurt, like I said in the first one. I was on pace to certainly, um, but they were all 5:10, 5:12, 5:13.
Wow, they're all within 3 minutes of each other.
Yeah, yeah.
That's crazy. Do you feel like you have unfinished business at the marathon distance because of that?
Yeah, I do.
Sounds like
But,
another one is
again, if I run New York next year, judging by what I said earlier, I still don't know that I can PR.
right, right.
Plus, I'm a
Well,
few years older.
yeah, I mean, it's crazy though. You might have been, I mean, you know that I was at Badwater this year crewing and pacing Danny out there. There was an 80-year-old who finished Badwater this year, and he has done it multiple times in his 70s onward. So there's still people who can, you still got a lot of life left in you if you want it.
The other thing I'll say is Chicago, I was 20 pounds lighter than the other 2.
Did you lose weight on purpose?
I was I went on a different sort of, I don't wanna call it a diet because it wasn't. I was eating whatever I wanted, but just a different sort of philosophy of how to eat, when to eat, and I did lose weight, gradually, not all at once kind of thing.
Mhm.
So I never felt weak or any of those things.
Yeah. Do you feel like you're going to go and do any of the other marathon majors since you've done two of them already? Or are you just going to stick with New York because it's, I guess, convenient?
There's other races I would love to do, depending on when and where.
Hmm.
Uh, you know, I remember I was in a few years ago, we were in Switzerland in Lucerne. The, just it was either 3 or 4 days before or 3 or 4 days after their marathon, which is considered one of the most beautiful marathons in the world with the Alps in the background and all that. I would have definitely run that race if we were there during it. Like, I would have had to, just because
Hmm.
we were there. That would be an amazing race to do, for instance.
Well, I will join you whenever you decide to sign up for that.
There's a lot of races like that that are just beautiful runs.
And you guys can cover the hotel, right?
Wow.
I joke.
He's already lobbying for that.
Let's start changing the topic over to trail running. I'm thinking of Europe and UTMB, so maybe this is a good time to switch it over to the trail running scene. So in between when you ran New York and when you ran Chicago, 19, You actually flew out to Colorado to crew and pace me for my first 100 miler, the Sangre de Cristo 100. You flew here on, it was very short notice, only like a week or two before the race. I started freaking out because it was my first 100 and I wanted some help. So you came out, my friend Brian Steiner drove out from Oklahoma. He drove like 9 hours on like a week notice after running his first Leadville 100 like a month prior. Brian, for anyone listening, has been on this podcast. Forgive me, I forget the episode, but Brian Steiner, he is now a 3-time lead man as of this recording. But he has been on the podcast to discuss his Leadville 100 along with the Leadman series once before, so you can check that episode out. But Brian and my dad came out on very short notice for my first 100, and I would like to hear what that experience was like just from your perspective and in your words.
What do I remember from that? I remember freezing in a tent the night while you were running because it went down to like 33 degrees or something. But, it was first of all, it was beautiful country out there where we
Mhm,
were. And I remember that the 10 miles that I did with you was an out and back where it was basically straight uphill for the out and straight downhill for the back with a lot of loose rock along that trail as well. So I really couldn't see how people ran that going downhill, frankly, although we watched some people do it.
well, that was mile 95 just for reference. You
Yeah, and
paced me the last 9 miles.
95, for some people, I think some of those people were actually running some of the shorter races, but they were on the same trail.
Mhm.
It was beautiful there. What I remember most from that race is as we were coming back, there was a point where we were walking down a steep part, and one of the race directors or helpers or volunteers stopped by you and said and asked you how you were doing, and you just looked at him. You looked him straight in the eye and said, "I will never do this again."
I
And
remember who that
I thought, yeah, right.
that was Jamie Reichler. Yeah, Jamie, and I was so pissed when his response when I told him I was never going to do it again. He said, "Yeah, you might be right, but like sleep on it." And I just like hated that he called my bluff. I actually loved him for that. I thought he was awesome. But in the moment I was just like, "Why do you have to remind me of that now?"
I don't think it took you 2 weeks to call me and say, "I just signed up for my next 100." So,
I think
you
it was a
know,
little longer after that. I signed up for the Bear 100 like 2 months later, but
it was pretty
yeah.
quick.
Well, the first thing when I finished, the first thing John, the race director, said to me was, he said, "Congratulations! So I'll see you at the 200 next year." And I was like, I had never even known before that weekend that 200 milers existed, and I was like, "You're fucking nuts, man!" And then 2 years later, I ran Moab 240. So, um, yeah, that was kind of funny. But yeah, you got to pace the prettiest section of the course from mile 95 to 104 up Music Pass. So that was 2,200 feet straight up. And then 2,200 feet straight down. That was a tough way to end 100 because those downhills are pretty brutal on the trails, especially that late in a race. But yeah, you got everything from Cassandra to Cristo. It starts and finishes in this Music Meadows is called. It's this big field where it's very community oriented. People camp out, they make a campfire. And you spent the whole first day of the race because it took me 34 hours to finish. So you were waiting there for me for 30 hours in the cold at night. But I mean, at least the stars were beautiful.
It was spectacular. If you walked outside the tent in the middle of the night, it's like nothing you could see here on the East Coast. You see every star in the sky and it's beautiful, so I enjoyed that. But one of the things I'll also mention is that when you know, doing that 10 miles up and back, and just being at the altitude for those days, I went home and the very following weekend I was running a half marathon and I ran a faster time than I ever thought I could in that race, and I do attribute it to, having been at altitude just a few days before.
Yeah, and it's funny because I remember when you were pacing me, you were so worried about the physical toll that being at altitude for the whole weekend was going to put on you before that half marathon, because I know it was one that mattered to you.
Yeah, I was tapering, and here I am doing this, where, like, I'm pounding my on my hips and my knees going downhill for the last 5 miles.
Yeah, my favorite memory from running Sangre and finishing it with you is we got to the top of Music Pass and we're gazing out at this magnificent view of the Sangre de Cristo mountain range. And you looked at me and you said, technically, you don't even need to finish now because you're at the mile 100 marker. So congratulations, you've run 100 miles. And I thought that was cool. I felt like I was like Clint Eastwood, gazing into the distance with that beautiful. It was a really cool, beautiful view up there.
Yeah, it was. I still have that picture that we took from there.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe I'll make that the cover photo for this podcast episode on like
I could
Instagram and
send that
stuff.
to you.
What was that?
I could send that to you.
Oh yeah, I probably have it, but otherwise you can send it over. I hope I have it. I'm pretty sure I do. Anyways, yeah, that was a lot of fun. And then for years, yeah, for years, I had been trying to get you to do a trail race. Basically, like since I got into ultra running and consistently in like 2019 onwards, I had joked with you about you running a trail race, and you kept saying no because I forgot what your logic was back then.
I
Um,
just said NFW.
you what?
I just said NFW. I
You
wasn't
can
doing it.
curse on this show.
Okay, no fucking way.
Yeah, don't worry. I clicked the box that says no, it's not for kids when I upload it. That way, you can say whatever you want.
Okay.
Yeah, so in December of 2022, my Christmas gift to you was a race registration for what's called the Cayuga Trail Runs 50K in Ithaca, New York, or just outside of Ithaca. I signed you up for it because it looked beautiful from the photos and it was nearby to, it was only like maybe an hour or two from Oradell. And you did end up having to defer that race entry to 20, so you were going to run it in 2023, but there was like a family or friend wedding or something, so you then did it in 2024. funny the funny thing about me signing you up for it was like you didn't ask to be signed up, and the big factor I didn't look at when I signed you up for that race was that it had 6,800 feet of vertical gain. I just saw a race that was close to you and that was beautiful, and I said, yeah, that sounds great, let's sign him up for Christmas. And then Olivia chipped in too, and that was your quote unquote holiday gift for the year.
So, one of the things that I came into this podcast wanting to say to anybody listening who's thinking about running a race is pick your own race. That's something that I did not have the opportunity to do. But, I agreed to do it because I went online and looked at pictures and videos and different things, and it is spectacular. And I told myself, I just want to see this course. It was really amazing. But when I did look up, trail races on the East Coast, it is considered, not one of the top 3 hardest, but one of the more difficult races on the East Coast. And I thought, gee, thanks, Stefan. And even during the race, I would be with runners who were saying to me, "Oh, this is your first race?" And I'd say, "Yes." And they'd say, "You really didn't pick an easy one for your first." And I would be just like, that's what I'd say to myself. I could thank my kids, they were thinking, how do we give him a gift and torture him at the same time? Um, we managed to do that.
Well, it sounded like it ended up being a good experience.
It was. It
um
was a great day.
your training for it was, I thought that you were wildly over prepared because you were running like 20-mile long runs every other week for like months, it felt like. I mean, you did that 5 or 6 times if I remember correctly, and I was like, man, this guy's like ready to go tenfold for a race that's only 10 miles longer than many of his training runs are.
I picked a training plan that originally, as I said, was 4 days a week, and I had cut it down to 3.
Hmm.
But as far as the long runs on Saturday, there were a couple of them at 20, 22, 24, and 2 at 26.
Hmm.
So, yeah, I did 20 or more a number of times for that race. But I will tell you that where some people, maybe someone your age doesn't need to do that as many times as I did, I needed it.
Mentally or physically or both?
Uh, Both, and I'll say why though. Like, I remember of the 2 times that I ran 26, there was one day where I was supposed to do 26, I did 24, and I was just physically spent and said, "I'm not going another step.
Hmm.
I'm done." And I quit. And that made me mentally say the second time, I have to do this today. And I did, you know, just for myself, for my own confidence, I wanted to do it.
Hmm.
And I remember feeling really good that day, and I did it without a problem.
Yeah.
I probably felt less tired than I did on the day where I only did 24.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of crazy when you go from training for marathons to using a marathon as your long run.
Yeah, I remember going out to dinner for a friend's birthday that night. He's like, "You ran a marathon today?"
Yeah, you didn't even post on Instagram about it.
Well, yeah, I don't post a lot.
That's funny. Yeah, so your training, we kind of talked a little bit about it. You said that the training is the reason, you've told me that the training is the reason you wouldn't do another trail race or at least a 50K or longer race again. Is that still your thoughts and feelings about it?
Yeah, I mean, it's an intense amount of work. And by intense, I don't just mean, you're tired at the end of the day. It's the number of hours each Saturday that I was spending was a little unfair to mom. And I'm not talking about chores around the house because I could do those on Sunday, for instance. But
Hmm.
for about like just having a weekend social life too, you
Hmm.
know, because there were days where I just didn't have it in me to go out,
Hmm.
after that. Um, and then there were plenty of days where I did. Even the night of the actual race, I did the 50K. It was mom's birthday.
Hmm.
So I came home, went back to the hotel, took an hour-long shower just to chill, and just let the warm water, run over me. And I take 5-minute showers. I must have taken 45 minutes in the shower. We went out to dinner and I felt fine. I was okay, and I remember, um, Olivia was with us and Gary was with us, and we had a great time that night. But, they were all worried that I wouldn't be able to make it, you know,
I
the
forgot the race was on mom's birthday.
yeah. So, I felt bad about that, but we had a great weekend, because there's so many things to do and see up in that area,
Hmm.
whether it's hikes or it's Watkins Glen or go to some, you know, wine or cider tasting, vineyards and places and some good local food, so we had a really good time.
How was the race itself? I don't want to skip over that.
The race was the only thing I wish was that I was sort of in the middle toward the back of the pack as we left, which was a bad idea because it immediately hits single track, and now you're stuck behind all these people, right? Like I could have not that in a way, maybe it's good because I didn't start too fast because of that, but it
Hmm.
also slowed me down for
Hmm.
for a distance. But the first 10 miles is where you see a really large amount of those views, waterfalls and just some beautiful places. And then this is a funny story. About 2 days before the race, we were at, I think it's called Buttermilk Falls, and you know, Gary and Olivia and I took a walk along it where you go up these stairs along the waterfall and then it runs along the creek as it's coming down. And you go up a few steps, you go down a few steps, you keep going. And I remember Gary looking at me and saying, if this is part of the race course, this isn't bad. You know, I remember coming around this bend after going down this long, steep path and coming right to the foot of the falls. And at that moment, I was at about just over 20 miles. And it was hot by then too. It was warm out that day. And I'm like, I gotta climb all those stairs alongside the waterfall. And I'm going up it and I'm actually using Siri to text Gary and I'm going, "This is fucking bullshit." Like, but it was easy 2 days ago. But, it was just as beautiful doing it then, and it's hard to run it because you're also looking. It's just so visually beautiful going through that area. And then I remember you come up this stairway at the end of it and you cross a road and now you're just in woods on a trail where you could run, to the about another mile and a half to get to an aid station. So
Hmm.
you want to run because you want to get to that aid station because it was pretty warm by then and it felt good to have something cold to drink and stuff to eat and all that. And actually, you know, mom and Gary and Olivia, they were all there waiting for me too, which was cool.
Yeah, and you had alluded to this earlier in this podcast episode where your nutrition changed from marathon training, and I presume to while you were racing this 50K too. What were you primarily eating during training and in your race?
I ate a lot of, like during the training runs,
Hmm.
I ate a lot of fruit and then like nuts and raisins mixes, protein bars, drank a lot of coffee and Tailwind. I always had Tailwind with me
Hmm.
and, the world famous Snickers bar.
Yeah, you've seen me run too many ultras with Snickers.
Yeah. Because as I said, I was doing those big circles and I could pass my car. So if I got to like 12 miles or 14 miles, I might stop at the car and eat some nuts and raisins or eat an apple or a banana, depending on what I wanted at that moment. If I was really hungry, I'd have a protein bar to fill me up a little bit more.
Hmm.
And I usually had them with me. I had the goos with me also that I was eating one of those, I would say every 2 miles.
Hmm.
And toward the end, as it started to get warmer, because I was training through the winter, I started taking electrolyte tablets with me, and they helped a lot on the really long runs, and they helped a
Yeah.
lot the day of the race.
Hmm. Was it hot there that day?
It hit about 77 or 78 at the top, which is,
Yeah.
like if you were in the woods, it wasn't bad, but if you were out in the sun, you felt it.
I mean, running on the East Coast is a little different. It's funny, like growing up there. Like, I haven't really done, even though I grew up there, I haven't done much trail running there compared to the West at this point. But the trails are rockier. There's a lot more leaves. It is easier to slip and fall because of that, I think, just it being more technical. But it is a lot more lush and vibrantly green. I mean, a few years ago, you might remember Dave and I going out when we were both in town, going out to the Catskills, and we did like an 18-mile run with it had like 8,000 feet of gain. One of the big differences out east compared to out west is that out here there are such things called switchbacks, which switch back and forth up the mountains, and then on the east coast they don't believe in that. They just go straight up the mountain. So the trails are just a lot steeper and rockier compared to the west, which is interesting, but it's also just super pretty with all the vibrant green colors out there. I really like it. I need to go finally run like a trail race in I don't know how many are in New Jersey, but I mean there's some good ones in like Virginia, Vermont, New York that I definitely want to get out there for.
There's a nice race in Beacon, New York, which is only an hour north of here. I'm glad you didn't pick that one for me because it does have some steep, serious rock climbs as part of it, um, which they tell you if you're not an experienced rock climber, don't do that race.
Yeah.
And, I was glad you didn't pick that one because that would have been maybe a little more intimidating than I wanted at that moment.
What
Even though
was
7,000 feet of gain wasn't, a picnic either.
what was your favorite and least favorite part of the 50K?
My favorite part was actually finishing and saying I did it because I did have a fear of failure.
Hmm.
I'll be honest. My least favorite part was, I trained for all the uphills and I was really good at them. Like I was passing people on uphills and they were long and steep in some places.
Hmm.
But what I didn't realize was that some of the downhills would be as long and as steep as they were. And they were brutal and they were hard. And I didn't fall on them. But I remember 2 days after the race, all the muscles around my ankles were killing me, because it was that steep and that hard
Yeah,
trying to.
it's funny from like a coaching lens. I have to remind a lot of athletes that if you're running a race with a lot of downhill, just a lot of descents or steep descents, you need to make sure to work those eccentric muscles and do exercises in the gym, especially if you don't live near a trail system that is super close to you. And if it's not something you can practice super easily, you got to get in the gym and really prioritize those exercises to get ready for that stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I did a good job of, building my stamina for uphills, but, I didn't do as good a job as I could have maybe for the downhills.
Yeah, for reference, he did not hire me as a coach. I just want to make that clear to people.
I didn't have to. I could ask you a question whenever I wanted. But no, you didn't build my training plan either.
I know. Well, you didn't ask me to, so
I
I
know.
didn't.
I thought you would kill me. I thought that like whatever plan you put together would probably kill me.
No, no, I'm not that mean. I see all of your bibs behind you. I see the Cayuga Trail PK bib 196. I see the Marine Corps Marathon medal that they gave us. Um,
They're all here. All the bibs are there too, but they're buried. Some of them may be a little more buried under pictures. I want to make them show up a little better. I'm going to work on that.
there you go. And there's, of course, the famous Tyree catch behind you from the Giants Super Bowl when I was in middle school.
Yeah. There's also the there's also the Ohio State National Championships,
The
two of
best
them.
ones.
Um, so I all my giant what you can't see is on the wall behind the camera are a bunch of Sports Illustrated covers from when the Giants won other Super Bowls.
I love it. Anyone from Massachusetts is not going to enjoy this part, but
Oh well.
anyways, let's see. And then this year, you actually came out to crew me at Western States. I would love to hear what crewing the granddaddy of them all was like from you guys, considering, you did come out to Sangre to crew me and to pace me. But aside from that, and aside from running your 50K, those were your only two real experiences in the trail and ultra running world. What was it like being at uh, I'm wearing the hat. My favorite race of them all. What was it like being out there and crewing that one?
It was amazing. And, one of the things that is, you know, glaringly obvious when you're at Western States is, after running, three marathons, obviously, if you've trained for a marathon, if you've trained for a 50K, you're in pretty good shape. But, when you run marathons, you see people of all shapes and sizes, that are running, in one way or another, they finish, right? But when we were at Western States, I saw a lot of almost completely everybody was like an elite athlete, and you just look at them and you see elite athlete, whether they were a runner, a crew member, a pacer, it was very impressive, from that standpoint. And what I also loved was there was a real love for the race among people who live anywhere along where the race is. I remember at the end of the race when we parked, by the high school for the finish line, there was an older woman that parked next to us. When we got out of the car, she was very friendly and she just asked us, "Who are you here to see run?" And we told them, it was you and, you were shooting for the silver buckle and all that. She looked at us and said, I come out here every year to just watch. She said, but I got my silver buckle exactly 40 years ago. And I thought, wow. I mean, that was just so impressive. People still, they love the race so much. They come back every year, whether they know somebody running it or not. Right. Like that just tells you everything you need to know about that race. We saw the elite runners when we were in the village the day before the race. I know you met a couple of them while you were there.
Hmm.
A few of them are people that you've known, like, we were at lunch, and there was one sitting at a table next to us. I don't
Hmm.
remember his name, but, it was just very cool wherever you went, and people that you talked to, and it was just a lot of fun being there, being part of the race, being at each of the aid stations that we were. It was so cool to just watch how organized that race is, It was really, really impressive,
Yeah, it was
you know?
very different from any other ultra that I have been to. I remember mom was particularly stoked when the announcers were going through the professional athlete lineup. She was really excited when there was a guy named Stringbean that they called up. She was like, started pushing her way through the crowd to get a glimpse of what does a man named Stringbean look like.
Well, that was because I think Joel had mentioned him because he was friendly with him.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
and so she really wanted to see him, not just because of his name, but because Joel had mentioned him.
Yeah, I guess Joel has done, I guess, some work with him in the trail running scene one way or another. Joel, who was my pacer, Joel Gartenberg, episode number 2 or 4. He was the first person I ever interviewed for this podcast, and he was my pacer at Western States. But yeah,
He did a
Western
great
was
job too.
what was that? Yeah, he did. He did. Western was something that I will remember forever, and it was really cool that both of you were able to come out there for it. It was a lot of fun. Well, We're coming towards the end of our time on the show here. I do have a few more questions for you. Some of them I would hope that you probably know they're coming, but yeah, I guess first, before I get to my last questions, I want to commend you for being a great dad, for teaching me how to be stubborn. That definitely rubbed off, and has allowed me to complete my 1,400 milers, including two Moab 240s with zero DNFs as of now, knock on wood. But I really appreciate everything that you taught me. I feel like I'm a good mix of you and mom, being stubborn and tough, but also vulnerable enough to share my opinions and feelings about things. For example, on a podcast like this, and in just other content and coaching and stuff that I put out. But thank you for that. But I do have kind of a few still last questions here for you before we wrap up. One of the things that I want to know is you have quite a few memories and races now under your belt. I was wondering what your favorite memory of your time, whether it was race directing like the Orida 5K or running your marathons or your 50K. What is a favorite memory from your running career that you would like to share, or that comes to mind when I ask that question?
A a favorite memory would probably be, when I mentioned finishing that first marathon, it was always at the finish, and not because there's an elation to that because the first marathon and then that first ultra,
Hmm.
there was a little more than a little doubt in my mind whether or not I was going to make it,
Hmm.
especially the trail race. I was, and I remember even saying that to mom when I finished, like, I can't believe I made it. I did it. And it was a little emotional too.
Hmm. This might be a good time to tell you that a few of my friends submitted questions for you for the podcast, and one of the ones,
No,
yeah, I know. One of them, I'll do the one from Joel first because I just mentioned his name and also because of what you just said. He was wondering, at what moment did you realize you were capable of running an ultra? Was there a specific moment in time? Was there a training run? Was it during the race? Like when exactly was that?
the moment when I told you I finished at 19 miles and calculated that I would have finished at that pace,
Hmm.
before the race closed. So
Hmm.
I knew I knew I wasn't going to walk the whole race, but it gave me the confidence that if I just keep training, I'm gonna do it.
Hmm. The other person who submitted an inquiry was Lizzie Roos, who was another guest on the Journey Running podcast. There's a lot of guests that I'm bringing up today. Lizzie was wondering, she says, I would like to know if and or how you draw any inspiration from me. Well, as in me. She was wondering how you draw inspiration from me, or if you do, as a runner and an athlete. She is aware that you signed up for Marine Corps, because of attending my first few marathons, but she's wondering what you think of my philosophies and stuff behind running and if that has impacted you at all too.
There are many times where it's impacted me in terms of, you know, just days where I'm really, really not feeling it, or I'm really, really tired, but I still have miles to go. And I think about what you've put yourself through. I think about the race at winter, summer, or never
Winter,
summer,
never summer,
never
yeah.
summer. I forgot the name, where, that had to be, that was a little bit beyond, just asking somebody to be perseverant, like that was crazy, but you did it. And I always think that there's nothing I'm putting myself through that's as bad as that.
So for anyone who doesn't know the story of my first Never Summer, I it was my first 100K. Before that, I had run 150K with basically no training in college. And then I ran a 50 miler in Oregon, the Mount Hood 50 in 2018. And then in 2019, I wanted to step up my game and do my first real mountain race. And so I chose Never Summer. And I didn't have the right gear with me for the race. Keep in mind, this was 2019. There were a lot less races, just weren't really as strict with the mandatory gear that you needed to carry back then. I know it was only 6 years ago, but a lot has happened in that time frame. So, anyways, I didn't have like a rain jacket with me. I put it at mile 40, and then it started thundering when I was on a ridge at like 20. And that turned into a huge storm. I almost got hypothermia. And then by the time I got to mile 40, it had rained so much that the last 24 miles of the race were just all ankle deep mud. So I just walked 24 miles through ankle deep mud to the finish line. And it was just a really crazy experience. So that's what he's referring to when he makes that comment. I hope that you don't have to do anything as yeah, as I say it was not fun, but I mean that was a probably a defining moment of my running and life career.
I do remember there was a guy who was about to drop out at the aid station who then finished the race because he saw you go.
He did. Yeah, I still that his name was Luke Popseal. Yes. And he has run Never Summer many times since then, I think. Luke said that he saw me continue at mile 30 and said, "Damn it, if this kid is going to do it, then I got to do it." And then he told me at mile 40 that he had continued because of me. And then at mile like 55, he starts sprinting past me in the dark and he says, "Man, my wife's going to be pissed because I told her I was going to be done an hour ago." And I thought that was the funniest thing. Like, that's the least of your problems today, I think. Let's see. This next question you should know is coming. What is your definition of greatness?
It's very individual and personal, and it's, in many ways, it's achieving what you think are your goals and aspirations in your life so that, you can, so that you feel good about those things when you're, looking back on it years from now. And along the way being, you know, a very honest and forthright person with people around you and, you know, so that people want to be around you and gravitate to you.
I love it. All right. And I have a few more for you just because you're my dad. Um, I thought that this would be we'll throw in some random Q&A at the end. I thought it'd be funny to ask you some family questions. So the first one I was wondering is who is your favorite child? And why is it me?
Next question.
Alrighty. You're smart to not answer that one. How did you and mom meet?
We worked for the same company. She worked in human resources, so I actually met her while I was interviewing there.
That's risky to be dating your recruiter
No, she didn't. She wasn't the recruiter, but she
or
worked
not
in HR.
worked in HR, yeah, still.
Um, but I actually went through a period of time when I started working there where I wanted to date her, but I didn't want to date somebody at work. So it took a little while for us to, get together. We became friends first.
Mhm. Didn't she like save the picture of you, your headshot or something?
Yeah, from an ID.
Okay, so I have one more question, and it's because when I visited grandma back in August, so just 2 months ago, she said that you were, quote, a ladies' man back in the day who brought home a new date to mom and dad every other week. So I have two questions for you based off that. I was wondering, why didn't I inherit that trait, and why did you pick mom?
Wow. First of all, I don't know that I would have ever classified myself that way. It was just a case of I was living in Manhattan at the time and you just meet a lot of different people. I just felt like I knew pretty quickly when it wasn't necessarily going to work out. So maybe I moved on, you know, earlier in my life, I had dated somebody for a long period of time, thought that maybe that was the person, I was going to end up with, and then found out that she was cheating on me. So one of the things that I think happened when I met mom was she was just somebody I always felt was so completely honest and maybe the most honest person I had ever met and someone that I fully trusted. And I do think that had a lot to do with it because I never had to feel jealous or worried that something like that was going to happen again.
What anniversary are you guys on now?
June will be 38. So we're at
38.
30. Yeah.
Okay, that's a long time. What's the key to a marriage that is that long?
Giving each other space so that you can both be an individual and be a couple.
and someone who lets you run marathons and ultras as often as you want.
Well, that was the space part, but, there's a limit to that too. Um, so I I would say that has a lot to do with it, and again, being honest with one another is a big piece of that.
Well, that is all the questions that I have for you. I will,
Very quickly, thank you to Joel and Lizzie for not making the questions too hard or too embarrassing.
I mean, I'll keep this in there so they'll hear it firsthand, I'm sure. I'll hand the mic off to you. Do you have any closing words, thoughts, stories, anything that you want to share? Usually, I give people the floor to also give people the opportunity to, uh, put their social media handles out there. But I don't think you're really posting anything. You're not really posting content, so you probably aren't gonna share your Instagram. But what is it that you would like to leave people off with today?
Well, I mean, I know we touched on a lot of this stuff, especially about being a runner who started, say, at a little bit later age than most
Mhm,
of the people who probably listen to your podcasts. But, some of the big things you always have to remember is when you're in your middle of training, listen to your body. Like when my knee started hurting, I immediately switched from 4 to 3 days, or I never would have gotten through it. It
mhm,
was a successful move. Cross training is vitally important. And I did a lot of studying of, I watched a lot of YouTube videos of previous years of the race, so I knew the course a little bit, or at least what it would look like a little bit. I watched videos about how to deal with injuries or cramps or anything else during the race, nutrition before or after, during the race, or after training and all that. Do your homework. And I know that it's important for people my age, but I think that works for everybody.
I'll never forget. I know we're coming to the end here in a second, but I'll never forget. You told me you were watching a YouTube video of the Cayuga, some guy running the Cayuga 50K, and you said that he complained the entire video. And you were like, why would anyone do this if they're not enjoying it?
Why would anybody even make the video? I mean, this was like it was from start to finish. All he did is he went up like the stone stairways or any uphills. All he did was complain and be like, yeah, and just how much he hated it. And I'm thinking, like, don't even make a video then. You know,
So, not those kind of videos, but educational videos and do
no,
your homework.
you come across those as you're going through it, and they make you laugh. But you just shake your head.
I had to bring that up because
That
I
was
always
funny.
thought
You
that was
gotta
really
be.
funny. Yeah.
I think I even sent you the link to that one.
I don't think I don't know if you I gotta go back and check. I don't think I've seen it, but, I kinda wanna go watch it now just to see what it was all about.
Send it to you again.
Sounds good. Alright, well, thank you so much for being on the Journey Running podcast. I love you. It was awesome doing this interview. I'm gonna click stop record, and, yeah, thanks for being here.
Love you, buddy.
Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for taking your valuable time to listen to today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Once again, the goal of Journey Running is to help you run farther, fuel smarter, and develop character through trail and ultra running. I really hope that you enjoyed today's episode. If you'd like to reach out with any questions, comments, hopefully no concerns on the show, or if you or anyone you know is looking for a running coach or a registered dietitian, please do reach out to me at journeyruncoaching.com or journeyrunningllc@gmail.com. Thank you so much again for taking your valuable time to listen to the show. It means a lot, and I hope that you have a really great rest of your day.